Good morning, Richard Calhoun, Creekside Realty. We're here to talk about the real estate market in week number 2 of 2023. We're going to be having an abbreviated different presentation today because of some technical issues. Anyway, this is a different slide that I found to be very interesting and actually found fairly surprising. It's my argument that people didn't seem to believe that the interest rates don't have that much impact on payment. And what I did is I took the median priced area in Santa Clara County, single family homes, which is Campbell, Cambrian, Santa Clara, Willow Glen, sort of, everyday homes, and looked at what the payment would be for the median priced home in that median micro market area. The PITI payment is the blue line. So as prices went up earlier in the year, the payment went up. Then all of a sudden, interest rates started to go up and prices started to fall. And the PITI came down. And for a little while there, right in the August timeframe, people were paying the same as they were back in January of 2020, despite the much higher interest rates. Then there was a little recovery of the marketplace, and now payments are back down again to where they were in the August timeframe as well as the January timeframe. So even though interest rates have gone from 3% to almost 6%, payments are actually the same now as they were in January because of the decrease in price of homes. The other thing that's interesting is the volume was the highest when the payments were the highest, and that's the orange line, and volume, the orange line, is the lowest when the payments are the lowest. So that clearly indicates to me that there's something that's driving the marketplace and the buyers, and it's sort of like the herd mentality. When all the buyers want to buy, the payments go up because of supply and demand, and when no buyers want to buy, the payments go down again because of supply and demand. And it's just, not what people expected. And, frankly, I'm a little surprised myself at the magnitude of this, but I don't see anything wrong with that. And to calculate PITI, I looked at Wells Fargo's interest rates that they publish every Friday, and I used their APR instead of just the interest rate because points would vary, and actually calculated the payment, assuming an 80% loan. And then I used 1.25% for property tax, and I used either 75 or more, probably more likely $100 for insurance. So I think I did a pretty accurate comparison, and it's just an interesting graph that shows that interest rates are not what's driving this marketplace. Moving on, and basically what we're not going to have is any slides for the Bay Area. Hopefully that will be back next week. The real takeaway again is the volume, and the volume this week is something like 829, and that's the lowest volume we had. The previous low was way back here in 2008 and was 969. We're selling fewer homes now than we've had any time in the past 25 years, and you can see the blue is where the lowest numbers were, and the light blue is here indicating that they were the second lowest, just for reference. That's the real takeaway. We went from basically, and early in 2022, so like a year ago, we were having the second best year. 2021 was the best year for the most part, and then 2022 was the second best. So you went from the best, second best, down to the worst, which is a pretty abrupt change. Here's the actual numbers, and these are current as of this week, Friday at midnight. You can see the number of new listings for the past 5 weeks is starting to go up, and that's because we're now past the holidays. And you can see it's pretty significant. For the three areas that I call Silicon Valley, we're up 46%. Santa Clara County is up the most at 59%, and San Mateo County is up the least at 35%. And that's just the number of new listings. Active listings are also up, not nearly as much because they're held back by the amount of inventory that was on at the end of the year. Overall, up 7.5%. The area up the most is Santa Clara County, up 9%. The area up the least is Alameda County at 5.4%. Then you go down to offers accepted. This is a little surprising, but this is what happens. And again, it's sort of the time lag. Because I'm using 5 weeks to get rid of statistical fluctuations, we're still including Hanukkah and Christmas and New Year's in that data, and we will for another week or so. Sometime typically around the 19th of January is when this tends to bottom out, but you can see that we're at 828, down from last week, and people might think we're up, but again, this is because you're going back in time. You're looking at the past 5 weeks. Yes, you have 14 days in January, but you also have 21 days in December. The other thing that is very noteworthy is, it's my opinion, and I think it's based up by the data that I've presented, that every holiday negatively impacts real estate except for Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, and that's because real estate is an optional event. So what's happening? The 49ers are hosting the playoff game right here in Santa Clara County. That is going to keep down the amount of activity. This is also Martin Luther King's holiday weekend, which is again going to keep down the activity, and then probably even the weather will keep it down. We typically don't have weather that impacts real estate that much, but this storm again is supposed to be a fairly significant storm, and I think with those three indicators, I think we're going to see the volume of sales stay a little bit lower than they normally would. Now you look at DUI, and again, this is based on 5 weeks, and DUI is increasing. Why is the DUI increasing? Inventory is now increasing because we're past the holidays, but your inventory is increasing because we're past the holidays, and your sales are still decreasing because that looks back 5 weeks, and so your DUI is going up fairly dramatically, up 11 days. I normally say that going up 5 days in a week is a change in the marketplace. There are exceptions to that general rule, and one of them is at the end of the year because the holiday impact is so significant. Then you look at the number of closings for the past 5 weeks, and you look at the average and median days on the marketplace. And in a lot of ways, we really can't be complaining, because when you have between 17 and 26 days being the time that it takes to sell half your inventory, that's really not bad. That means half the sellers are selling their home in 2.5 weeks or just under a month. That's pretty amazing. But not nearly as impressive is the frequency of overbidding. That's at 34% with a low of 29% right here, and call it 30% right here in Santa Clara County, and a high in Alameda County of 38%. Basically, right around a third of the sellers are getting more than their asking price, but that means 2/3 of the sellers are getting their asking price or less. And typically, somewhere around 10% of the sellers are getting their asking price. So you can basically say something like, 57%, 55% of the sellers are getting less than their asking, and 10% are getting their asking price. And that's their asking price at the time the offer is accepted, not the original asking price. Then you come down to the average. That's just sort of everybody averaged. Notice the Alameda County on average is still getting over 100% of their asking price, which is pretty incredible. The typical seller, the midpoint, is 99.7%. These numbers, it's very hard to get below 100%. And the reason for that is buyers don't, and when I say below 100%, you go a little below, maybe 1.5%. After that, it becomes very difficult because a lot of buyers wait for a seller to reduce their price versus going in and offering a low purchase price. Conversely, if some buyer comes in and offers 5 or 10% below the asking price, it's typically best to adjust your price down to 2.5% to see if any other buyer would come along and get into a bidding contest, or think that the value was at 1% below market and didn't think you would take it and was just sitting on the sidelines. Those two things combine and make it difficult to get much below 100% of their asking price. Then you have the 10 percentile pricing, the 90 percentile pricing that nobody really tends to follow, but I think is very useful because it sandwiches the price, and in the green is the median. And this is very noteworthy down here, and I pointed this out a couple times now. Silicon Valley, the 3 counties combined, has gone up 18% from 2020. But each county, San Mateo County's down basically 6%, and the county doing the best is up 9%. So how do you pull these range and get 118%? Basically, to impact the median for the 3 county areas, all you have to do is be selling over $1.1 million, and every area except for Alameda County, so San Mateo and Santa Clara County, can be selling quite a bit below the median and still be pulling up that median for the 3 county area. This is a great example of why I don't think Bay Area data that the media follows is meaningful. what the Bay Area and 9 counties are doing is completely irrelevant to anything else. And this clearly suggests it, because if you're looking at just these 3 counties, you're going to say that prices are up to 18%. But when you start looking at the properties within any given county, they're not up nearly that much. And what I would actually propose and tell you is typically when you start looking at micro market areas, the majority of the micro market areas are doing less well than the county for the same reason. And there are times when it goes the other way, where the individual counties and the individual micro market areas and the individual property values are going up greater than the combined area. That's just something that's worth making sure people understand a little bit. We're now talking about Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, and San Mateo. We don't have any Alameda County data going forward, I don't believe. So here's your breakdown of the key components. Santa Clara County is at 87% of the inventory that it normally has for this time of the year. Last week we were at 92. San Mateo County is at 130% of the normal inventory. And I did not get this week's data, and I probably would have had access to that. I would have, because here it is graphically. We'll just have to look at it on the graph. Here's your graphical data so you can see each micro market area. The only areas that are doing at all well or relatively well are Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Foster City, which is a very small micro market area, and the North San Mateo area. The coolest areas are the expensive areas in San Mateo County, Atherton, Menlo Park, and the coast. And you can see the actual numbers over here. This is single family homes only. This is overbidding, same concept, where this is just the magnitude of overbidding. And you can see some areas down at 95%. That's actually a pretty low number. 94.9%. Those are lower numbers than you typically see for the reasons I've already mentioned. It's typically, if you got an offer 5% below the asking price, a lot of sellers will go, well, maybe someone will pay me 3% below my asking price and take a price reduction and put the property back out there before they do it. This, again, is not over the original list price, but the list price at the time the offer is accepted. Having said that, you can see the 2 areas in San Mateo County are doing better than 100%, and not any area in Santa Clara County. This is the frequency of overbidding. How common is it? And again, these numbers of 9% and 15% are pretty low. When we were coming out of the World Trade Center in that kind of era, and also out of the recession, a lot of times the lowest numbers you saw on any magnitude, widespread, was around 15%. So these are below sort of the floor, or right at the floor, and 9% would be below. But there is some statistical fluctuation, especially because the volume is so low at this time of the year. In fact, there's a couple of my searches that come back with no properties at all. Here is the median price. And again, I've talked about this for the last several weeks now, is the Bay cities in San Mateo County, which would be Millbrae, Burlingame, Belmont, San Carlos, and San Mateo. I think those are the 5. These areas are normally more expensive than Redwood City. Redwood City is currently holding more expensive, and you can see that actually in the real numbers here. Redwood City median price is $2.1 million, where the Bay City's median price is $1.9 million. And I glanced at it, and I think what I'm remembering is San Mateo County, for the entire county, was down like 8%, but the median price in Redwood City was up something like 21%. And Redwood City is a fairly large portion of San Mateo County. And that just shows you how certain areas for certain periods of time can outperform or underperform even the county data. Here's showing DUI going back color-wise for some period of time. And you can see that this week is quite a bit bluer and the pink is a lot paler. Yes, there's some fluctuation, like Foster City is pretty bright red, but look at how small the inventory is out there. The inventory is probably something like 7, and the number of homes sold is probably something like 4. This really doesn't count, even though you can't see that. And the other area that really wouldn't count is the coast, and even the expensive areas, because they're not selling any homes. But the general trend, you sort of have to do a blended and sort of note that this area is paler pink, darker blue, which would be a decreasing, slowing down of the marketplace. Here's the breakdown of the different areas on the conditions, so you can pick your micro market area, see what the conditions are, or find your price range and figure out what area you want to be looking in and what the conditions are. Here are some of the data going back. And this one, you got to be a little bit careful. This is January data, which is typically not going to be available until February 5th because you need 31 days in January and 4 days in February to get to 35 days. So something like inventory for this year, which is only as of midnight last night, is going to be really artificially low compared to where it will be in February, most likely. You got to take that with a grain of salt. DUI is probably higher right now because of what we've talked about already. The fact that inventory is going up because we're past the holidays, but sales are still going down because 5 weeks are still going into the holidays. You don't have to get 5 weeks past the holidays for days on sold inventory to behave normally, but you have to get about 2-3 weeks past. So we're basically next week, I'd expect the numbers to start going the other direction again. And then the number of closings, which, is pretty dramatic, 427 transactions. That again is pretty low. You can see that way back here, we were somewhere around 600. That was 500 right here in the 2010 range was sort of the lowest numbers. Or actually right here in 2020, 2019 and 2018, 2019 and 2020 are some of the lowest numbers. This number again by February will most likely start increasing. Not that much. It's almost a harder one to tell because with the sales still going down now, closings will still be going down, but they'll start going up. And so that's a really hard one to judge which direction it will go. And here's comparing apples and apples, but it's looking in the rear view mirror. And with that, I do hope to be back to my normal graphs next week. I could not get the last 10 days to work correctly, despite putting about 7 hours into trying to get them to work. And I'm just about finished. I'm in year 2017, working backwards to 2014 and getting the new data. And the new data is going to be very similar. The big changes is I'm including attached homes, what's called duet homes. And the reason for that is in adding in Sacramento County, San Joaquin County, and San Francisco, I noticed there was a large number of duet attached homes, which sort of surprised me. And then what I realized is a lot of people are considering the row houses in San Francisco, which are fairly common, to be attached houses. And I guess to some degree they are, and to some degree they're separate homes that are just built right up next to each other. And then in San Joaquin and Sacramento area, it turns out that there's a very high degree of input error. It seems like people are thinking that attached means an attached garage, not an attached structure. So I did a data analysis, and it was going to be more accurate overall to include attached homes, and this does not include condos and townhouses because they're in a separate category, as single-family homes. So I'm working through to get the consistent data. To give you some idea, in San Francisco, attached homes was something like 35% of the marketplace. So I was only doing 2/3 of the marketplace when I was doing single family detached homes. And the error rate in Sacramento and San Joaquin County is about 17%. I was missing about 17% of the single family homes. And if I include the attached homes, I'm only off by about 2%. Felt that a 2% error was better than a 17% error. And to some degree, if you really only have one wall attached, it is often sort of like a single family home. For those reasons, I made the executive decision to include attached homes, but not townhouses and condos in my data going forward. And that's why I'm doing that. With that, that's a long-winded way of saying I think I'm done. I'm open for any questions, any concerns, anything anybody wants me to repeat. Not seeing any questions, I'll call it a day. Good luck. See everybody next week, and I expect to be back to normal next week. Bye now.